Welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. I'm Andrew Sumner. I have a returning guest, and that returning guest is Garth Ennis. How are you, mate?
I'm good, Andrew. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Very well indeed. Lovely to see you again. I hope you've been well since we last met.
I have indeed. Yeah,
Excellent.
well, I had a little bout with COVID, but I beat it in 4 days,
Oh,
which
nice.
suggests either something very good or something very odd is going on, but I'll take it.
Well, I think that's glorious to hear. So I recently went to a local pub in London's glorious South Bank with a bunch of my Forbidden Planet colleagues, and they all got COVID. I didn't, and they were taking out, all of them, for about 7 days each, including our head comics buyer Rob Pontefract, who is just recovering as we speak. So you know, I would say 4 days. You're a very lucky man.
Yeah. Well, it's my third go round, so presumably I'm just getting better at it, you know.
I think that is the key. Anyway, enough of these grisly, certainly man-made viruses of today. Let's talk about a man-made virus of a different kind, war, and specifically Volume 2 of Battle Action, which is being collected by Rebellion, again in that beautiful annual format that Volume 1 was in the very near future, and is available from the links to be pre-ordered from the links attached to our conversation. As you know, mate, I loved the first edition and I loved Volume 2. Looking back on it now, with that glorious dirty dozen, if you will, of creators that you assembled, how do you feel about it?
You know, I'm delighted. It's one of the, looking back on it over the past couple of years, it's one of the biggest surprises of this stage of my career. I was actually talking to Oliver Pickles, the editor, the other day, and he was asking me about this, and I said, you know, that before I mentioned it to them, I'd probably only thought it up about a week previously. We were talking about something else. I had been thinking about the battle and action specials of 2020, wanting to do more, and it just popped into my head. Well, when I was a kid, the comic I picked up from my newsagent was called Battle Action. It wasn't Battle Again on its own for several more years. So therefore, what if we came up with a new publication, a special for starters, see where it goes after that, and we just call it Battle Action? What would happen then? And I pitched it to them. They liked the idea. The rest is history. But that it has gotten as far as it has, with the second collection about to come out and the third series, this is no big surprise. I believe this has been announced, or if not announced, talked about. The third series on the way later this year. Honestly, no one's more surprised and no one's happier than me.
Yeah, I think it is a glorious outcome, and I think one of the things you and your fellow creators did really well on this second volume is just the mix of what you've got in there, and the mix of who you selected to write what. Whether it's Rob Williams, another old mate of ours, or Torunn Grønbekk, you know, great creator. You know, you've put these really interesting people on the right books. I think. Do you just want to break those down for a sec?
Well, let's see. John Wagner was the obvious choice. Although I think he had expressed an interest in an interview or something like that, after he'd seen the first Battle Action special that we did. And I think it was just a happy coincidence. And we said, well, what about more Nightshade? Because he's often said, I think, that he closed that story down before he really wanted to, and on reflection, he'd rather have kept it going. So, obvious choice. Apart from anything else, he's John Wagner. You know, he started Battle with Pat Mills in 1975. He created Darky's Mob and HMS Nightshade. It's a no-brainer, you know. Rob, another obvious one, great writer who also likes war stories and is familiar with the material. His tastes are slightly different to mine. You know, he likes Major Eazy and I don't, particularly, and so therefore he's the obvious choice to write such a popular character. There's no point in me sort of trying to chop out something that I'm not that keen on, but Rob loves it. Dan Abnett, you know, he's one of those writers. It's like there's nothing the man can't do. He can turn his hand to anything. I personally thought his story in the 2020 Battle Special was the best of all of them. It was terrific. And so the second time around, as the third time, we go to him and just ask him what would he like to do. And you know, there he is. He can do something interesting with D-Day Dawson. Right? That shouldn't be possible.
Yeah, it's so
But
true.
can do it. And Torunn's an interesting one too, because she's obviously very talented, but also she has a fascination with World War II history and combat aviation in particular. She volunteers at her local aviation museum in Norway, so she spends a couple of days a week, you know, polishing up a Heinkel 111, and she's part of a initiative to get a Spitfire back in the air in Norwegian markings and so on. So this was a dream come true for her. She loves this kind of thing, and I think, you know, being a woman interested in aviation, the Night Witches can't be far off the top of your list, which means that Nina Petrova is the obvious character for Torunn.
So, well said, mate. I think I know it's such a dream project for you. For me, as you know, a long time reader of Battle and all the old war, you know, growing up on the old war books, war comics as I did. What's particularly satisfying is to see it produced with the great amount of love and interest that all of you do, but for it to be such a successful set of stories, so that, you know, often these things, because I've lived through, as you have also, you know, some half-assed revivals of this stuff, and it's like, well, you know, it's like kind of, you know, being given the best chocolate bar you've ever seen in your life and trying to eat it with the paper on, right? And it's just like, man, there's just something so off about this. But you guys, 2 volumes in a row, have actually nailed what makes Battle work and what makes it so iconic.
Yeah, it comes down to, I mean, if there's a formula, it's exploring the idea of the old battle and action characters with all their hyperbole, all their kind of over-the-top grotesquerie in some cases. In others, they're getting close to the reality of the situation, but having to pull back from it. It's looking at those and applying a kind of a modern sensibility to those. So if you have Dredger, well, he's already to deal with action first. He's already a nasty piece of work, and there's a darkly funny edge to some of his adventures. So let's just push it further in that direction. On the other hand, if you want to look at something like Hellman, okay, action, but really battle. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
a battle character born in the wrong comic by mistake. All right, a German tank commander who always fights fair. Well, that's just not true. The settings that they give Hellman are fairly realistic. His progress through the war is what a German tank commander's would have been. His fighting to defend what's left of Germany in Berlin in the last days is handled very well. But because they have this notion of the good German, of the good guy in a bad cause, they can't face the ultimate reality of a character like that, which is he would have, if he hadn't participated, he would have known what was going on. And so that is what we can actually face full on and explore properly in these new stories. So you take the roots in the old ones and you just put a modern sensibility on it and get it right, and you should have something fairly decent.
Yeah, right on. It's so on some levels you can correct the premise where it's been inhibited by the time in which it was originally published, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's very well said.
I mean, and Hellman again, they could go so far, they could go so far down the road, but not all the way. But they were able to show us things and talk about certain realities that we simply hadn't seen in war comics before. Well, we'll now simply take that as our starting point and go the rest of the way and be honest about the character in the way that the old strip was fairly honest about the progress of the war.
Yeah, that's very interesting. who is out there in the pantheon of battle and action characters that you would like to take a crack at in future?
Well, let's see. I mean, as I say, we do have this third series coming along now. To deal with action first, we did realize that the second time around we only had 2 action stories and 8 battle stories, and one of the action ones was Hellman, who again is, yeah. This time around we've decided to make it 50-50. I should explain that the next time around, and again this is out there, this has been down the tubes, covered this a while ago. You're going to have 10 issues. Every issue will have an episode of a Johnny Red story by myself and Keith. That will make up a sort of, what will that be, 140, 150 page story when it's finished. Every issue will also have a one-off story featuring another character. So you'll get me on Hellman and Dredger again. You'll get other people. John will be back on Nightshade. Torunn will be back on Nina Petrova. You'll also see, all right, well, if I say you'll see a large marine predator.
There we go.
That will hardly come as a surprise. You'll see a couple of other characters from both comics that we've seen in the second series, the first and second battle actions. You'll also see some ones we haven't seen in those. The trouble with action is that because it was only there for what, a year and a half, it didn't really have time for its characters to develop into anything really special in the way that Battle developed Darky's Mob and Johnny Red and eventually Charlie's War. The one exception would probably be the aforementioned Marine Predator. But so when you look at the action stories, you're left with you're not left with much room to maneuver. You've got Dredger, yes, you've got Hellman, and then you've got a couple more, and then there's a big drop off to the rest of the characters. I mean, I can tell you that no one's in any rush to bring back Green's Grudge War or the Running Man, or any of those. Now there are a couple of others. You can probably guess which ones we will be featuring. The ones that the comic is better known for. But it is hard with action because whereas Battle, you've got 10 years worth of stuff there and an incredibly rich first 5 years, so that there must be perhaps 70 or 80 different strips that saw print, maybe more if we don't include the Action Force stuff and so on. With action, there's so few that are really worth talking about. I will say this: we've managed to get one creative team on one of those action strips that people are going to find quite hard to believe. They're going to do a bit of a double take when they see who we've got right in one of these things, but for them, that's all I can say for now.
Well, that is a brilliant tease. And let me ask you one more question before we go. So a couple of years ago, we worked on the Titan collection of Darky's Mob, one of my all-time favorite British comic books. Introduction by yourself, edited by a mutual friend, Uncle Steve White, and is that now? Of course, that is a perfect piece of comics, right, with a beginning, a middle, and an end. But would you ever think in terms of doing like an insert storyline into that, or is that just something you could slot into the overarching narrative? Because there are moments where you could do it, or is that a sacrosanct piece of work for you?
For me, it certainly is. It's sacred ground. However, what John Wagner might say if you asked him that, it might be very interesting indeed to find out what John would think about that. He will be doing HMS Nightshade again for the third series. What he might do for the fourth, if there is one, and we're very much hoping there will be. I would like to write another long form story. I have an idea for Rat Pack, actually. We'll have to see if we get that far, but at that point, John would definitely be the guy to talk to about Darky's Mob.
Yeah, and it seems to me that Darky's Mob produced within contemporary sensibilities, that would be a very interesting thing, particularly if it had a credible link with the original, that's a very good point, mate.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see it personally.
Yeah, I mean, if I can avoid spoilers, if you read Darky's Mob all the way to the end, you find out something about that character that you are not expecting at all. I remember being 11 or whatever it was when I was reading it, because I read it in the reprint run in Battle,
yeah. Right.
which was itself censored.
That was the relettered version, wasn't it?
That's right. And they also skipped several issues. I think there
Yeah.
was one where you find out that Darky's a Buddhist,
Yeah.
where they decided, but if you read it all the way to the end, you find out something about the character. The clue is in the name, shall we say, that I was not expecting at all. And it would be really interesting to explore that from a modern perspective. What John might do, I do not know, but I'd be fascinated to see it.
I think that's very interesting indeed, mate. At the end of the day, what a massive treat to produce 2 volumes of this and to be walking into a third one. I mean, that's as you say, at this kind of stage in your career, to be able to work on something you truly loved your entire life, that's a gift, right?
It is. It's the most fun I'm having right now. It really is. I wrote that Johnny Red story I mentioned. It's actually technically 11 episodes, because the last issue will be all Johnny Red. But yes, that was an unimaginable treat, to be able to take that story all the way to the end and give it a proper conclusion.
Oh yeah, amen to that. Garth, great to see you, mate. Great to talk about war comics. You know, which again, I could do that for another 2 hours. So you take care of yourself, mate. The links to everything we've been talking about are attached below for order and pre-order. And Garth, I'll see you very soon.
All right. Cheers, Andrew.
If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.